Back in 2005, Xbox needed a Gran Turismo killer. Sony was simply dominating simulation racing. Gran Turismo, it was untouchable. Microsoft needed something serious. And a brand new studio called Turn 10 appeared with a game that nobody really expected, called Forza Motorsport. It was a racing game that was so ambitious it would become one of Xbox's biggest franchises ever. And going back today, does it still hold up? Well, I've got it. I've got an original Xbox with a copy of this game. I've got myself a little Logitech steering wheel and I'm going back through it to see how it holds up. And what we're going to be watching here in the background is me just kicking off the career. Now, it's not all going to be sweetness and light. There are a couple bits. You can see here I got to the end of the race and just basically forgot what version of Silverstone I was on and ended up taking myself out. So I had to restart this one. But all I'm doing is the first sort of 5 or 6 races of the career mode, just to give everyone a bit of a taster of how groundbreaking this was at the time. And I find going back to these early games absolutely fascinating. This game is over 20 years old, and I don't think that back then anyone could have predicted that this tiny little Xbox game was going to be the start of something massive. You know, today we've got Forza Horizon on number 6. It's just absolutely crazy, and it's one of the best franchises of all time. And it certainly did challenge Sony's PlayStation delivery of, you know, all of the Gran Turismo games. So I'm going to look back and talk about where it all started and what I think was great about this game. You know, the Xbox was still young. PlayStation 2 was absolutely dominating racing games. Gran Turismo owned the sim racing market. Xbox had some really good arcade racers, and there were some things that were looking a little bit more into the realm of realism in terms of you know, the customization available in Need for Speed, and Project Gotham Racing had good stuff, you know, but Forza aimed for that real realism with all the customization options, but real life racing tracks, real life racing situations, you know, getting yourself in different classes of cars, doing the upgrades. It was great. It was revolutionary at the time, and I'm going to tell you why. Now, I think the damage modelling for the day was really, really good. Again, remembering it's over 20 years old, so it's quite dynamic. The car tuning was fantastic, very much taken from Gran Turismo's offerings, I think. The car liveries were great. The physics were good. You know, you could do drivetrain swaps. It had Xbox Live multiplayer, which was really, really big. The AI difficulty was actually quite challenging. You know, you'll see in this that sometimes they appear to be driving on rails a little bit, and they do look like they're sort of taking you out. But to be fair, there was no real bad rubber banding. You know, if you're out in front, you're out in front because you've earned it, and if they're catching you up, then it's because you've made a mistake. But there's a really good way to, you know, tease yourself off of the assist that it gives you. You know, the racing line assist, the stability control. You can get used to the game and you can start turning that stuff off. And the variation in the cars is fantastic. You know, the little nippy cars feel quick, they stick to the road. The big heavy American cars do feel big and heavy and harder to steer. You know, there's all sorts of other great vehicles in here. It's just absolutely fantastic. And they're all, you know, very much like Gran Turismo. They're vehicles that you'd see on the road every day. They're in manufacturer colours. They were instantly recognisable, you know, and it just gave you that feeling of, you know, something you could actually achieve and drive, and something you've probably driven or been in real life, which I think is really, really big. You know, the pacing of the progression was great. The soundtrack was good, although I've obviously turned the music off now because of copyright. But yeah, handling was great. The visuals for the time were good. The frame rate was really smooth. The sense of speed was good. You know, the sound of the engines, the screeching, the glowing brake discs, all of that stuff was absolutely fantastic. And I think this really did lead to a huge legacy. You know, Forza Motorsport 2 was a big step up. Obviously, every Forza Motorsport after that was a big step up to about number 4, where people think it might have peaked. You know, 6, 7, and the latest one, maybe not so much. But, you know, it did spark the Horizon series. The Horizon looked at festival racing. It was open world. It was, you know, it's a fantastic set of games. Again, going back to Forza Horizon 1, very, very groundbreaking at the time, and certainly sparked a load of other titles that, you know, are still around today. So yeah, absolutely fantastic. I think, you know, we all need to remember how groundbreaking this was for the time and really give it its flowers. And that's exactly what we're going to do. There were some fictional tracks like this one, and I absolutely love this track. Every variation of it was fantastic, particularly online. I used to have some of the closest races online ever. on this track and absolutely loved it. Road Atlanta as well is coming up. That's one of my favorites. And there's one I think called Blue Mountain, which is a fictional track, but again, some really fun layouts, and having that mixture of real life locations and, you know, some fictional ones as well gave it a real edge, I think. So I hope you enjoy it all. Once I've finished the talking, I will leave the gameplay running for you. There's some fantastic races, there's some really close stuff, there's some good battles with AI. You know, you'll see some different sort of sky and weather effects in terms of sort of the time of the day, which I think looked fantastic for the, you know, again, bearing in mind it's 20 plus years ago that this game was released. And yeah, there'll be more footage coming, so I hope you stick around to enjoy it. So, as you can tell, I, for one, thoroughly enjoyed this game, and I'm going to enjoy going back through it. So as part of our sort of look at retro gaming, I am going to be going back through Forza on my little steering wheel, and I'm just going to be reliving these nostalgic memories. So I'm going to start the career, I'm going to work my way through, I'm going to progress, I'm going to earn money, I'm going to buy cars, we're going to upgrade, we're going to basically unlock as much as we can and get all gold medals all through the career. So it's going to be a bit of a grind. So if you're up for it, let me know in the comments. Get in there, tell me if you remember this game, tell me how interested you are to see me go back through it. Tell me what cars to buy, tell me what you remember about this game. You know, do you agree that it was quite groundbreaking at the time, you know, to have this level of detail and immersion in a game that was trying to be, you know, a step towards the simulators that we have today. And I'd love to also know what else you played from this sort of era. We're talking, you know, early to mid 2000s. What other driving games do you think rivaled this? You know, it was very much at that point an Xbox versus PlayStation type situation. People tended to be in one camp or the other. If you were a Gran Turismo sim fan, you know, that was the best racing game ever. When this came out, if you were an Xbox person, this was the best racing game ever. I was lucky enough to have both systems at different times. So I was really big fan of Gran Turismo on the PS1, and then I moved into Xbox gaming, so I was a really big fan of this. When Gran Turismo progressed a little bit further, I really wanted to get it, so I sold my Xbox and bought a PlayStation again. I picked a PS2 for Gran Turismo 3, and I back and forthed, you know, through many years of gaming between the two. So I was a big fan of both of them. But yeah, I'm just really loving going back through this, and we're really going to have some fun. So make sure you sub if you like this sort of content. Check out some of the other content as well. And for now, we're just going to enjoy the rest of the races of me just starting off the career. And let me know what you enjoyed. And at the end of the video, there'll be a link to another fantastic video in our collection, so make sure you click on that. But if you don't click sub and you don't get your noties on, you won't know when more of this content's coming, so make sure you do that. And I'll probably do some of this on a live stream as well and chat to subs and watchers at the same time. We've been doing that quite successfully. It's always been good fun. So again, get those noties on and you'll get notified of that. And I'll let you enjoy the rest of the racing. Some of it does edit out a little bit if there's mistakes or restarts. I tried to keep the racing as exciting as possible, but I also wanted to include everything for context. So I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you on the next video. Take care. Peace.